Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Small, or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Gesshoo, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Dani.
Small, Chapter 4. Callie stood stark naked on the soft gray bath mat, waiting for Sarah to finish readying her bath. Her lips dipped into a frown as she rubbed over her swollen stomach, poking out like that of a pot-bellied pig's. "So full," she groaned, and Sarah chuckled. "That is surprising, since half your dinner is still on your cheeks, my love," she said, and switched off the tub faucet. Bubbles foamed up over the rim of the deep tub and filled the small room with the scent of orange blossom. "How about we wash your face before we get in, "Okay, Sarah." Sarah dipped her hand into the water one last time to ensure it wouldn't be too hot. She grabbed a washcloth from a shelf by the sink as she rounded the tub, then dipped it into the water as well. Once it was saturated, she wrung it out and dropped to her knees in front of Tally. "Look at all this sauce," she chuckled as she wiped spaghetti remnants from Tally's cheeks and chin, scrubbing a bit harder where the sauce had dried. Tally shrugged her little shoulders and giggled. She grabbed onto Sarah's hand holding the cloth and pushed it gently away. "Bath time!" "Yes, bath time," Sarah said, and stood. She tossed the soiled washcloth into the sink basin, then hooked her hands under Tally's arms and lifted her easily. He settled her down into the bathtub and laughed as Tally released an obnoxiously dramatic sigh. "Nice and warm?" "Yup." "Good." Sarah eased back onto her knees beside the tub. It took only seconds for Tally to be covered in bubble foam. She slapped it onto the top of her head like a hat and patted it onto her chin. "That is an impressive beard you have, my love." Tally grinned, and Sarah felt the stretch of it in her soul. Tally's smile would never not be disarming, no matter her age, no matter Sarah's mood. When a blob of bubbles suddenly smacked onto the top of Sarah's head as well, Tally squealed with laughter, and Sarah playfully narrowed her eyes. "You think that's funny, do you?" Tally only giggled harder and dunked herself down into the water. When she popped up again, her wild hair was slicked down her back and pasted to her face. Sarah pushed it back and wiped the water and bubbles from Tally's eyes so she could open them again. Then Tally spit water across the bath like a tiny cannon, and Sarah shook her head. "You are a little menace, aren't you?" "Sarah, get in." "Not tonight," Sarah chuckled. "But how about I wash this hair for you, How does that sound?" Tally sighed dramatically and drooped her shoulders down towards the water. "Fine." Sarah bopped the tip of Tally's nose with her finger. "Don't pout." She collected another washcloth from the shelf, along with Tally's shampoo and conditioner and a bar of soap. When she knelt by the tub again, water soaked right through her pants, and Sarah immediately assessed the large puddle now trickling over her floor. "What is this? Did you throw water out of the tub?" Tally curled her lips inward until they were barely visible and ducked her head. "Tally, why did you throw water?" "I don't know," Tally said, sounding far too exasperated for a 5-year-old. It seems like a good idea at the time. For a long moment, Sarah only stared at her, and then she burst into a loud peal of laughter that turned Tally's lips outward again and stretched them into a smile. Well, Sarah said, I can appreciate the mindset, but let's not do that again, please. Agreed? Agreed. Good girl. Now, turn, please. Tally spun in the water, squeaking across the porcelain, and settled her back against the side facing Sarah. Shampoo for Tally, she sing-songed, and Sarah just smiled to herself and began her washing. As she did, Tally busied herself making shapes in the bubble foam with her small hands. Sarah watched her fondly, scrubbing her nails over Tally's scalp as she massaged in the shampoo. My Sarah, watch! I'm watching, love, Sarah said, and then Tally was singing. She was working. The lovely little hum emanating from Tally's throat beckoned her bathwater up in long, tentacle-like tendrils that danced through the air and braided together beautifully. Sarah felt the thrill and awe of it, drawing her lips into a wide smile, thumping in her chest like affection come to life. It was simple work, really. But for a 5-year-old? Water work was often the first form of work young witches performed when they first began experimenting with their voices, even if by accident. But Tally's level of control was astonishing. Tally crooked her little hands at the tendrils, beckoning them to her, and to her they went. They curled and danced around her soapy head before dropping messily back down into the water. She giggled and sighed sleepily the second they were gone, the work having tired her, and lay her head back against the edge of the tub. Her big, beautiful eyes stared up and back, the bathroom light catching and reflecting in them tiny white halos. Did you see my Sarah? I did. Sarah bent and pressed a kiss to Tally's soapy forehead. That was beautiful work, my love. Tally yawned and plopped her hands atop the water a few times. Now you. Now me what? Beautiful work. Sarah chuckled at the way the words sounded on Tally's small tongue, warped and precious, and helped Tally sit up. Let's finish washing first, and then I will give you a show before bedtime. Deal? You promise? I promise. Deal! Tally shouted excitedly, then immediately dunked herself under the water again. It took a while to have her fully washed and rinsed, and by the time they were finished, the water was lukewarm and nearing uncomfortable levels of cool. When Sarah pulled the plug from the drain, Tally stood and wrapped her arms around herself. She shivered as Sarah grabbed a large, fluffy towel from the shelf. Arms up, she said, and Tally shot her little arms into the air so Sarah could wrap the towel around her and haul her up over the steep side of the tub. There we go. Good girl. PJs for Tally! Sarah frowned as she realized she didn't have any pajamas for Tally, none that would fit her at least. She didn't want to keep taking the fosterling's supplies, and she had no idea how long Tally would be stuck in this body. So she sighed and made a mental note of sending someone to purchase more clothing for her girl first thing in the morning. Outfits, underwear, socks, shoes, and, of course, warm fuzzy pajamas, just the way Tally preferred them. Well, when she wasn't sleeping nude, which was, of course, the way Sarah preferred. Sarah wrinkled her nose, preferring not to think of such things while Tally was only 5 years old. I don't have PJs for Tally, but how about one of your Sarah's shirts? Will that do, my love? Tally's eyes widened comically, and a dimpled grin lit her face. She dropped her forehead against Sarah's cheek almost shyly, and Sarah melted a bit. I will take that as a yes. She squeezed Tally close to her chest and carried her into their bedroom. Halfway to the bed, she stopped and shifted Tally in her arms to hold her bridal style. Slowly she began to rock her back and forth like a pendulum, swooping her arms in a bigger and bigger arc as Tally squealed and squealed. And then Sarah tossed her easily so that Tally flew out of her arms and landed with a delighted, giggling oomph in the middle of the bed. an adorable pile of towel fluff and red hair and sprawling, lanky limbs. "All right, soldier," Sarah said as Tally sat her naked self up, the towel pooling over her lap. "Dry off while I get you a shirt to wear." From her dresser, Sarah selected two shirts, one a plain black long-sleeve thermal, and the other a plain gray t-shirt with Army printed across the chest in black lettering. She held them up for Tally to choose. "What do you think?" "Army!" "I suspected as much," Sarah said, and tucked the other back into her drawer. "Okay, time to get dressed and then bed." Tally huffed, dissatisfied. "But you promised." "Oh, that's right." Sarah chuckled and yanked the shirt down over Tally's head. "I will keep my promise, my love, but we must get ready for bed first." "Fine," Tally grumbled again. When all was readied, Tally in her oversized shirt and Sarah in a similar shirt paired with sweats, Sarah pulled back the blankets on her bed and urged Tally under. As soon as she was in, Sarah clicked off the lights and joined her. Instantly, Tally swarmed her. Her small body curled around Sarah like a koala around a tree and gripped tightly. She yawned dramatically and wiggled like a little worm. "I'm ready." "Very well," Sarah said, and tried to think of something that might delight her small girl. When she began to sing, starting low and building, Tally's grip on her arm tightened. A gasp rent the air when the space above the bed filled with dancing waves of light. Sarah's work manipulating the bits of moonshine cast through the one small window on the opposite side of the room. The lights undulated and brightened, dimmed and then brightened again, and for a moment it was as if they had their very own view of the aurora borealis just above their heads, and Tally was absolutely thrilled. She squeezed Sarah and giggled, reached for the lights, never quite able to touch them, then giggled some more. She was pure, sleepy joy, and Sarah loved her. And when the work dwindled down to a low hum in Sarah's throat, then dissipated into silence and darkness, Tally sighed happily and snuggled her face into Sarah's chest. "I love my Sarah," she said through another yawn, and Sarah sighed, content enough to be as they were. She ran her hand over Tally's still wet hair and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love my Tally," she whispered. "Sleep now, my love. You've had a long day." She barely got the words out before Tally's loud snoring rumbled into the air. A second later, her little feet kicked roughly into Sarah's thigh, and all Sarah could do was chuckle and hold her tighter. In some ways, this child was so very different from her Tally, and in others, she was so hilariously, wonderfully the same. When Sarah woke, it was to a weight on her chest and little, sloppy kisses being planted all over her face. She frowned and blinked her eyes slowly open to find Tally sitting on top of her, grinning widely. She immediately smooshed her nose against Sarah's and with awful morning breath said, "My Sarah, I missed you so much." Sarah gently pushed Tally's hair out of her face. "I've been with you all night, Tally." "So much," Tally said again, then collapsed to the side, sliding off Sarah's chest with a dramatic whine. "More than I missed anybody in my whole life." Sarah chuckled. "Well, I've missed you too, my love." "I miss you," she stopped herself from saying, but she felt it all the same. The ache in her chest for her Tally, for the way they were meant to be. "It's now 0700, my Sarah, and I desperately need pancakes." Tired and amused, Sarah rubbed her eyes and sat up. She tickled Tally's side, smiling at the girl's answering squeal, and said, "I see you are still a morning person." "You know who loves pancakes, my Sarah?" Sarah quirked the brow. "You?" "Yes!" Tally squealed and giggled again and rolled around in the bed until all the blankets were yanked off Sarah and wrapped around Tally like a trailing toga. "And Ophi, too." "That is true," Sarah said and made herself get up. "Ophelia does love pancakes." "Yes, Ophelia does," echoed the woman herself, and the other biddies' tired laughter filtered along the link after. I second the baby's need for pancakes. And sausage, Lissa added. Yeah, Lish, we all know you love sausage, Yarrow added, and Sarah rolled her eyes as she stretched her arms up over her head. My Sarah, so long. Sarah laughed and shook her head. So, pancakes for breakfast, and then we must go see Isadora. Pancakes for Tally! Tally sang, ignoring the rest, and then before Sarah could even process what was happening, Tally was springing out of the bed, trailing blankets behind her, and running excitedly out of the room to the biddies' quarters. Tally, wait! Sarah called after, but the girl was already gone. A second later, she heard a loud oomph from the room over, and when Sarah rounded the door to follow, she found Tally in the arms of Ophelia, bouncing excitedly on her hip. The biddies were all dressed and ready for their day, lounging around the room, waiting for them. Ophelia hugged Tally close, even as she said, She's heavier than she looks. Just wait until she's full of pancakes, Cake said, and Sarah nodded. She is an armful, to be sure. Pancakes for Tally and Ophi, Tally sang again, and Ophelia didn't bother waiting for Sarah to head off towards their private dining room. Join us when you're ready, Sarah, she called over her shoulder. The coffee should be up by then. The other biddies filed out after her, and all Sarah could do was watch in amazement. Even as a toddler, Tally had as much command over the biddies as Sarah herself had. The powers of a soul bond she awed, and a 5-year-old's dimples. Sarah shook her head as she laughed and headed back into her room to dress. As she went, she reached out through far speech to request someone head to the store for toddler clothes, and did her best not to cringe while doing so. Goddess, it had been a strange week. By the time Sarah managed to get Tally washed up and dressed, she was near ready to pull her hair out. At first, Tally had been excited about her new clothes and boots, but after a thorough scrubbing that left her cheeks pink but blessedly syrup-free, she'd been less excited and more in the mood to be ornery. She'd sprint around their bedroom and the biddies' quarters in nothing but a new pair of tiny polka-dotted panties with her hair and her demonic little giggle lying behind her. And, of course, Sarah had been the only one attempting to wrangle her. Her biddies had simply sat atop their beds watching, clearly amused by the sight of Sarah chasing a toddler. You could help, you know, Sarah had told them, only to be greeted with a chorus of laughter in her head. When all was said and done, Sarah fixed her braid and straightened her uniform and ordered Tally to behave like a tiny soldier, because it was the only way to get her to do anything properly or at all. She set off across base, first with Tally at her side in her purple leggings and a green long-sleeved t-shirt, holding Sarah's hand and walking neatly. But halfway across base was apparently her limit for behaving herself, because she skidded to a stop and let go of Sarah's hand and shouted, Piggyback! Tally, no, Sarah said sternly, and Tally frowned deeply. Why no? Because we must maintain a proper image, mustn't we? Sarah tried, a bit gentler. You may hold my hand and walk beside me. No, Tally whined. I want a piggyback. Just let her get on your back, Sarah, Savannah softly urged. No one will judge you for it. It is one thing to chase her naked behind around our private quarters, Sarah said. It is quite another to be seen lugging her around base on my back. It's undignified. Your soulmate is 5 years old, Savannah replied, and a troublemaker at that, cute as she may be. This is an unprecedented situation, and by now, everyone is undoubtedly aware of it. I doubt anyone would judge you for doing what you need to do to keep her calm and happy. And if I give her everything she demands when she demands it, what message does that send her? That you're whipped, Lisha laughed. Which we don't already knew, Yara added, and Sarah huffed, annoyed. I'm not a troublemaker, Tally suddenly said, pouting, and every gaze shot towards her. Savannah's eyes widened. Did I say that out loud? You did not, Sarah quickly replied. Kate started shaking her head in the background. This just got creepy. I'm not creepy, Tally denied, her pitch firing up into a shrill whine. It vibrated with the clear sounds of work, and Sarah watched, horrified, as the ground around Tally's feet began to shake, crack, and build into small volcano-like mounds. Tally, control yourself this instant, Sarah snapped loudly, and Tally's eyes blew so wide they seemed to take up half her face. But the mounds around her feet only vibrated harder and grew. My Sarah? She pouted, her entire body now shaking like the ground beneath her. Mad at Tally? Sarah quickly dropped to one knee and latched onto Tally's shoulders. No, my love, she reassured. I'm not mad at you. I just need you to calm down. Okay? Can you do that for me? Fat teardrops rolled down Tally's cheeks. You yelled at me, she whispered, and Sarah's heart crumpled in her chest. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to raise my voice. Not mad? Not mad, Sarah promised, and looked down at the trembling, torn-up ground again. But you cannot do work like this every time you are upset, my love. Do you understand? You could hurt yourself or someone else. Tally pouted as Sarah wiped the tears from her cheeks and beckoned her into an embrace. As she huffed little wet breaths against Sarah's neck, the vibrations beneath them slowed to a stop, and all became calm again. I'm sorry, Sarah. You're forgiven, Sarah said and rubbed her back. When you feel upset, you must try to breathe and stay calm. Okay? Use your words, not your work. Okay. I'll try. Sarah sighed, relieved. Good girl. She hugged her a little tighter. Now, I need you to tell me, my love. Can you hear the biddies speaking to me all the time, or only just now? Only now. Sarah frowned into Tally's hair, still stroking her back. She had no idea how that would even be possible, but she supposed she felt much that way about most of the recent developments concerning her soulmate. Another item to add to Isadora's list. The scientist would, no doubt, be thrilled to add another layer to the mystery she was tasked with solving. What's going on here? Sarah looked up to find Anacostia striding over to meet them. Her daughter took in the ripped-up ground with a frown as she said, I thought you'd be in the lab already. I was sure I was running behind. Sarah sighed heavily again. She stroked Tally's hair and rose to her feet, taking the girl's hand in hers. We were delayed by a brief incident. Oh? Tally wanted a piggyback ride, and Sarah wanted to keep her dignity, Lisha explained, and Anacostia chuckled. I see, she said, then squatted in front of Tally, who was hiding her face behind her thick hair in shame. Good morning, Tally. Hi, Kostya. Tally mumbled from behind her hair, and Anacostia's laugh deepened. She reached out and pulled aside the curtain of auburn, tucking it behind Tally's ear. It didn't stay put, but Tally's face remained mostly visible. How about I give you that piggyback ride? She offered, and Tally's face brightened instantly. She started to jump toward Anacostia, but quickly stopped herself. She squeezed her small hand around Sarah's and looked up at her pleadingly. Okay, my Sarah? With a dramatic sigh, Sarah said, I suppose it's okay. Yes. Tally squealed like a little mouse and lunged towards Anacostia, who was already turning around and waiting. She climbed up onto her sergeant's back and bounced happily as Anacostia hooked her arms under her knees and carefully stood again. You realize I am trying to teach her boundaries, yes? Sarah said, pinning Anacostia with a mostly playful glare. She can have boundaries when she's 19 again, Anacostia said. Until then, I'm just here to be the cool aunt. Wouldn't you be more like the cool stepdaughter? Kate asked, and Anacostia's nose wrinkled. I'm Not even going to entertain that, she said, then started for the necropolis, leaving them all to trail behind. It took everything Sarah had in her not to shove Jarl to the ground when the biddy sidled up next to her and said, "My knees still hurt, Sarah. Can I get a piggyback? You know, in exchange for all that beauty and youth." "You can get information before I wind strike you back to the Middle Ages, you old hag."
Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.